to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to the third Surviving the Survivor of the day, the podcast that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime. It's been a really heavy day. You had the Suzanne Smith parole hearing, and we listened to her ex-husband, David Smith. It was heartbreaking. And then we just did a follow-up show, and we're back here. It's been a day that has felt like 7 months to me. Among many things, I was locked out of my studio today and watched the custodial crew here break down the door. That was interesting. And now two of our three best guests are MIA in the MIA. But you know what? We've got one amazing one, and that's all that matters. So we are going to be talking about Suzanne Simpson tonight, the mother of four. She is still missing. Neighbors saw something, a physical altercation between she and her husband, Brad Simpson. Police investigated, are still investigating. She has been missing, and he has since been charged with murder. At first, he was charged with some lesser counts, now charged with murder. And so we are going to dig into this and hope to be joined by the other best guests, who I'll tell you about in a moment. But first time for Brian Weiss. Brian Weiss, W-I-C-E, for those spelling at home. He's been recognized by his peers as one of the top criminal appellate and post-conviction writ lawyers in Texas. Over the past 40 years, he's devoted the entirety of his practice to criminal law. He graduated magna cum laude from the University of Houston. Phi Slamma Jamma. Were those the years?
I was a little bit after that, but I became friends with the fellas as I worked my way through undergrad and law school as a sports writer, and I still actually talk to a couple of those guys.
There you go. Phi Slamma Jamma. If you don't know what it is, Google it. And we are welcoming to the show Dr. Lenore Walker, who is she is in her field very, very well known. Thank you for being here, Dr. Walker. She has literally written the book on battered spouse syndrome, known as battered woman syndrome. That is the title of her book. She has a doctorate or educational doctorate, I believe it is. She's interested in research on various forms of gender violence, especially battered women, essay, harassment, human trafficking, things of this nature. And she's going to hopefully finally answer for us the age-old question: why do husbands kill their wives? Sometimes, I know Brian can tell us, sometimes wives kill their husbands. It goes both ways, but it's primarily the other way. But Brian, to you, this is, is a long list. There's actually a very similar case out of Colorado with Suzanne Morphew, who went missing. The husband, Barry, was a prime suspect. He was on the verge of trial when charges were dropped. It's unclear where the investigation stands now, but case is very similar to this one. I know you guys don't like to say they're slam dunk cases, but this seems to be about as close as you can get. This is a big job for a defense attorney.
Let's make no mistake. This defendant, this citizen accused, like anybody accused of any criminal offense anywhere in the free world, is entitled to the presumption of innocence unless and until the state proves their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, unless it's a proceeding in which we can have confidence that produces a reliable result. Okay, now, having said that legal disclaimer, this guy is in a world of hurt. There was a probable cause affidavit that was released, I believe, last week, which makes it clear that he's probably guilty. And when you and I were talking before we came on, we talked about the quantum and quality of evidence that the prosecution in Bexar County seems to have at its disposal. And like, I know Nico's probably going to nod his head sagely. In West Texas, they might call this a slow plea of guilty. Make no mistake, this defendant is certainly a 3-touchdown dog, as we say, going into the first period, guys.
There you go. Nico, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Nico, Yeah, he's the former DA for Bexar County, which I was calling Bexar until I was corrected by our San
Did Mr.
Antonio.
Weiss correct you? Did he?
No, not him. It was
Nico, you never correct the host. It's bad form. That's like Market 150. They'll 86 you in less time than a Kardashian marriage. You never correct the host.
So it's amazing. I don't think we've had 3 brand new best guests in one shot on a show. So this is pretty awesome. I can tell already can be bringing them back. But I'm going to get to Dr. Walker. She is the matriarch of tonight's show, and I've got questions for her. But first, Nico, to you, as former DA, this is obviously a horrible case. You know, he's now charged with murder. What is the DA's office doing right now? Obviously, this looks like it's headed to trial. Looks like a huge uphill battle for any defense attorney. But the people who have your old job, what are they doing right now?
Well, they're preparing for an examining trial, obviously, which is very rare. I mean, there's been maybe 5 examining trials in the last 5 years here in Bexar County. And so they're going to be debating the legal sufficiency on a probable cause standard on whether they have enough to hold him in custody. But the rules of evidence apply, and Brian can speak to this as well. And so they're going to have to present their evidence. Usually an examining trial means hurry up and indict my client. And so that's what it normally does, because what a prosecutor usually does if somebody files for an examining trial in Bexar County is we indict them. They just get indicted. You go to a grand jury. It's easy to indict somebody and you move forward. So the defense seems like they're pushing the ball. If they're playing poker, they went all in. They said, okay, you raised me. We're going all in. Let's see what you have. You know, it or get off the pot. I'm not sure what I can say on your podcast. So I don't want to.
Let's keep it clean for right now. We can get a little wild there. That's got to be
5, 4, 6, 4.
That's not my phone. Is that Lenore Walker?
That's mine. I confess.
Good job, Lenore. You ever been on TV before?
Sorry about that, but I don't have any mute button here, so I don't know.
It's all good, Lenore. We're dog friendly and
Sixer, get her out of here.
Yeah, we're rotary phone friendly here at STS. I haven't heard a ringtone like that in a while. But Dr. Walker, you know, all kidding aside, on a serious note here, there's a lot of victims in the chat here. A lot of people who are, were victimized are members of STS Nation, some of the most empathetic people I know. Everyone is always asking this question, as am I. And I mainly ask it of law enforcement, but what are these husbands thinking, killing their wives instead of just taking a moment, walking around the block, getting a bag of potato chips, doing anything but murdering the spouse? Why does this happen? And it seems like it's happening with more frequency.
Well, I think the big news for a psychologist is that these guys are not thinking. That's part of the problem. They've been allowed to get away with hurting their wives and controlling their wives for a long time. And it just escalates. Their anger, they don't control their anger. Their anger gets worse and worse. Sometimes in these cases, the man gets out of control and accidentally kills her. Other times, it's not an accident, but rather a planned killing to get rid of her because she represents a threat to him, whether it's a psychological threat, whether it's a financial threat. We don't always know. Each case is a little bit different. But this case has all the earmarks of the cases that I work on where women end up killing the husband because they believe that he is going to kill them. And they're right to believe it. We know that if you look at the crime data, that more men are killing women than women killing men. As soon as we started building battered women shelters for women to go to and places, we started helping the prosecutors' departments prosecute these cases at low levels. They don't reach a homicide. But when the cases get to this point, these women are in danger, and we need to find better ways.
Yeah, Dr. Lenore Walker, we may need a doctor for your Wi-Fi. It's clinging on for dear life right now. If it gets any worse, I'm going to have you go on your phone. But by the way, I did my due diligence. Dr. Lenore Walker went to Rutgers University. I grew up in Highland Park, New Jersey, Dr. Walker, a stone's throw from Rutgers. And,
absolutely. I was in East Brunswick and Piscataway.
There you go. There you go. I went to Brandeis University, so I cannot root for any sports teams other than Rutgers because Brandeis arguably.
Now I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which is,
we're neighbors. I'm going to take you to lunch. We are definitely neighbors, and I can tell this is going to be an interesting show already. COE, I might need to look at this one. We're thinking of starting STS singles from Becky Ireland. OMG, Nico is gorgeous. FYI, I'm older, but not blind.
Wait, was that Stevie Wonder that phoned in? Who was
that? Brian, I can tell you're going to be good friends with Steve Cohen. You guys have a similar type of humor. That's what I'm looking for.
You know, I only took his call because I thought he was the schmuck that owned the Mets. He wasn't. Yeah. He was a schmuck, but he didn't own the Mets.
I wonder if that schmuck is going to pay what's his name, Juan Soto, $700 million. We'll see.
It's worth every penny.
Yeah, that's what these billionaires do. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. Obviously, this is already off the rails, but we'll get it back on. So, Brian, to you, Brad Simpson, he's behind bars, $3 million bail associated with the charge. He's got a public defender. A lot of people wondering why this guy has a public defender. It just seems like he came from money. He's in a construction business, I believe. Others are saying that he's having financial problems. Any guess as to why a public defender for a guy that seems to have at least multiple homes?
He doesn't have money. That's it. I mean, there's one place you don't go chintzy on. It's your defense lawyer when your life's on the line. So, I mean, the word on the street over here is he's having financial problems. It's obvious. He's blessed. The public defender that he's been appointed is a diligent public defender. From my law partners have said, I've not seen him personally, so I'm holding on to my own opinion until I see someone in court myself for their work. But I trust my law partners, and they say that he's a diligent lawyer, so he's blessed in that sense. But he obviously can't afford to hire lawyers, because if there's ever a time to spend money, it's when your life when you're facing the serious charges like this.
Yeah.
And Nico, what do you prefer? Do you prefer prosecuting or defending? It's got to be tougher to defend, I think.
I like them both. I loved being the DA. I actually tried cases when I was the district attorney. I was proud of the work we did in the office, but I like it both. You need honorable people on both sides. I mean, this day and age, it's, win at all costs, and I can't stand that crap. And so, when I was in office, there was a culture in our office. We did what was legal, what was ethical. And if you can see that sign behind me, that was in my office, in the DA's office. Do what's right, not what's easy. What's easy is easy, and everybody will do it. Doing what's right is hard. And I always stood in front of the prosecutors when they did something hard, but it was the right thing to do. That's not the case here in Bexar County or many of the counties surrounding Bexar, or maybe even where you're at, Brian. But so I like them both. I think we need honorable people, men and women on both sides of the aisle.
There you go. Karen, I think it's Karen. Bexar County, is that where Judge Stephanie Boyd is out of? Is that Nico? Can you confirm?
Yes, sir, that is correct. Stephanie Boyd is out of Bexar County.
There you go. There's the answer to your question. Lest you think we are not a global show, Portugal's in the house at this late hour. It is quite late there. Brian, back to you. So Nico mentioned this examining trial, and if you haven't figured it out, we've got two attorneys, a former DA, and then we've got a world-renowned psychologist who specializes in battered women's syndrome. So we've got kind of a mix here. But Brian, an examining trial, it's not a term or something most people are familiar with. Break this down for us. What is going to happen? How soon will this happen, Brian?
Set for December the 9th, unless, as my good friend Nico said, the state turns around and indicts him tomorrow. An examining trial is a determination of whether there's probable cause to believe this defendant committed the offense that's been charged in the criminal complaint. In some states, it's known as a probable cause hearing. But at the end of the day, it's really much ado about nothing. Even if they do get to December 9th, the state is going to be cagey. Again, the poker analogy is not at all inapt. They're not going to show all of their whole cards, frankly, because they don't need to. I think all they will do is show you the 15% of the iceberg above the North Atlantic. That's no big deal. Remembering, of course, that it was the 85% of the iceberg below the North Atlantic That's the state's case that sunk the Titanic and may well sink this defendant.
Yeah, this I'm no lawyer, but this seems, Nico, this does seem like as close to a slam dunk, at least at this point, as it can be. Do you agree with that, or is
No,
there?
I don't know. I mean, I read the probable cause affidavit, and the circumstantial evidence. Can you prove a murder circumstantially? Yes. But Brian can speak to this. He is our appellate expert on the panel here today. But there's a Snowball case out of Dallas, right, Brian? I mean, where they didn't have, I mean, it was 25 years, 6 years they waited. Because they didn't have a body. So this is a no body murder. So you don't have a body. You have to prove death and murder by circumstantial evidence. Then you have to prove a nexus to the accused circumstantially. Now, in that case, she told her daughter, I'm going to go talk to your daddy. There was a divorce. He's trying to screw me over. She goes to the house. Her car's found at his house. She goes missing. He reports her. 6 years later, they prosecute the case. The jury, 25 years sentence. In a 170-page answer or ruling, they said, look, you proved she was dead, but you didn't prove a connection to the defendant. And that's a no-body murder. So, I mean, do I think that they could easily get, if there's no change of venue motion filed, which I think that he'll do eventually, could they get a conviction? Yes, but it's not always about the trial court verdict. It's can you sustain someone like Brian Weiss on appeal?
Well, and let me just say this, Joel. You know, the whole expert, thank you, Nico. But it's like Mark Twain said, yeah, an expert's just some guy from out of town. Okay, I don't really know if I necessarily qualify. But look, you have to go back almost 25 years to my home state of Connecticut, to the Richard Crafts wood chipper murder. That was the first case that the state's attorney in Connecticut successfully prosecuted, withstood appeal on multiple levels without a body. So the Court of Criminal Appeals has made it clear that this is not a situation of whether it's close enough for government work. If the Bexar County prosecution team can prove this defendant's guilt, every element of the offense beyond a reasonable doubt, fine. But I think it's interesting. Once again, Nico kind of got out ahead of us, and spoiler alert, I think what we're going to see at some point is a motion to change venue. And the reason I say that is because there's a reason why I'm on this podcast tonight, other than the fact that apparently, Nancy Grace was unavailable, is that a good friend of mine who is an anchor reporter for WOAI in San Antonio has had me on multiple times. And the fact that they're reaching out to another market tells me that this is not just a local or state story, but an international story. It's been on GMA. And as somebody that's ultimately lectured on changes of venue, I think eventually, in the not too distant future, that's what we're going to see come down the pike.
Yeah. By the way,
I think one of the things.
Oh, go ahead, Dr. Walker. Go ahead.
I think one of the things that I would want to know is, are there other cases against and any other domestic violence cases that have been in this particular case? Did Suzanne Simpson call the police? Did the police come? Are there police reports? We don't really know that at this point. A history of domestic violence really does, it's more evidence, and these are the type of crimes that I often end up testifying in, is to show that the domestic violence often escalates. And so if we know that it's there, even though we don't quite have all the 100% elements that we need, it does give him a harder time for his defense.
Yeah,
the affidavit does show that, though, right? I mean, that's what it says. Look, I have a theory in the office. We have a way of thinking that we believe none of what we read and only half of what we see until we can see the evidence ourselves. So just because an affidavit says something, that doesn't mean much to us until we see the objective evidence that supports it and undergirds it. So there's allegedly the neighbor saw them arguing, pulling away. She runs into the woods. I don't know if he ran after her or not. That's unclear. Then she goes missing. He hears a scream. And then he's buying cement from a Home Depot's, and he's asking people in Kendall County, where's the dumps area? Circumstantial evidence, got it. But again, the body, and can you make that connection? So I just don't know what they have. What I'm curious about.
But doesn't she tell her banker that if she disappears, to look for her in the lake? I mean, so she's reporting before this incident, she's reporting to what I assume is a credible reporter that things are not good and that she's feeling threatened. So there may be even more information earlier than just what we have right now.
Agreed.
And that's what I would say.
And doctor, I'll tell you what I'm curious about. I'm curious about this friend of his, Cotter, or whatever his name is,
James
and
Cotter.
what he's talking about. Is he talking and singing the blues to get his ass out of a sling? I don't know. It matters. But I mean, I just can only contemplate a defense attorney. Well, look at what happened with Lake and Riley. There's an illegal immigrant in here committing a crime like that. Did she go off on a walk because she's pissed off and then somebody get her? I mean, it's a reasonable doubt case, because you have a circumstantial case, and then when you tie in reasonable doubt, you don't have to prove that he's innocent. You just have to prove, have the jury have a reasonable doubt to come back with a verdict of an acquittal. So, I mean, it's just too early for us to give a full legal analysis. But I mean, that affidavit does not read favorably, obviously, to the defendant.
I got a vibe from Nico that if you play him in like pickleball, he's gonna like just kick you in the head. Anything to win. This guy's tough. And he's feisty.
Oh, wait, let me say this about my guy. If Nico's the guy you want watching your back in a rumble, okay? I mean, he's the Russ Tamblyn character in West Side Story. He's the guy that will shiv you and then go home and eat a cheeseburger and watch pay-per-view. Okay.
Nico, do you know any
cheeseburgers? But I will shiv you. Yes, you're right.
Do you know martial arts, Nico?
I used to fight. Yes, sir.
You did.
And I think we want Nico back earlier, though. We want it before it comes to murder. Yeah. We want him protecting us when we're just beat up.
I'll tell you, Joel, I was just as tenacious as the DA.
Yeah.
We were fair. We ensured justice was done. I'm proud to say that one of my law partners, Jason Goss, was the attorney that I appointed on the Janine Jones case that out of Kerrville. The angel of death. We believe that she was responsible for 60 murders. It was a case that was closed and couldn't be settled by 2 DAs before me. And he took 5 boxes home, and we got 5 new indictments before she was going to be released in 2018. We had phone calls of her in jail saying she was going to be drinking Mai Tais on the beach, and we had a different plan. And so, if I was in office just for that case, it was worth it. So thank you for the compliment, Brian. I appreciate it. But that dude,
and let me
let that good looks fool you. This guy's a beast.
Yeah.
Look, the fact that Nico's got that sign about doing the right thing for the right reason, I didn't want to be a prosecutor, but it came to me late in life, like male pattern baldness or diabetes or alcoholism. And I was one of the special prosecutors prosecuting our Attorney General, Ken Paxton, over the course of 9 years, the last 8 of which, we didn't get paid. And I recognize that being a prosecutor is exactly that, doing the right thing for the right reason at the right time, and not really caring about the haters, the Monday morning quarterbacks, and the mouth breathers. And, when you take that oath to 28 million Texans, most of whom hated me and gave me the finger when they'd see me in public, it's knowing that the power that you have is immense, and you're the most powerful, man or woman in the courtroom. And in this case, I hope that the Bexar County District Attorney's Office makes sure that in spite of all the, the Sturm und Drang, what my nana used to call chubs and dreh, I don't know what that means, but I think it's Yiddish, that they create a level playing field, and that there is a trial that is fair, that produces a reliable result. Because without that, everything else is conversation, guys.
Yeah. I just want to jump in because some people are not familiar with the case. And now that we're 23 minutes in, probably a good idea to give everybody a quick summary. So Suzanne Simpson, again, is a mom of 4, and I'm using the present tense, hoping that she is still with us. But by all accounts, it seems like she is not. She is a real estate agent. Kids range in age from 5 to 20. The minor children, 5 and 15, were living at the house. She got into this argument with her husband, Brad Simpson, on October 6th. They were at a country club, a restaurant called the Argyle. Some neighbors saw him pushing her around. October 7th, he drops the kid off at school, and then reports her missing much later in the day. They've got conflicting statements. He already has some conflicting statements that we can get into in a moment. And again, we did the show just a night or so ago. So I really want to open it up to STS for this amazing panel if you have questions. But I have questions for the doctor. Number one, Dr. Walker, how did you become interested in this field to begin with? That's question number one. And question number two from Ohio Palm Mom. Are there really more cases of men killing their husbands, or does it just seem that way because information is ubiquitous?
Oh, I think there are a lot more cases of men who are killing their wives. There's no question about that. I got interested because I was studying the issue of women who were being abused, and I was talking at a conference, and I said to somebody who asked me a question, women are getting killed every day. What should they do? And I said, well, they should defend themselves. And if they end up killing him while they're defending themselves, well, I'll help testify on their behalf. Well, I really had nothing to do with the law before one divorce myself and a parking ticket. I really did not know what I was saying. But before I got back home, this is when I was still living in Denver, Colorado, I had my first case in Billings, Montana, with a lawyer who called me and asked me if I could help a client who he believed killed her husband in self-defense. And I said, well, I don't know anything about law. And he said, well, he knew a lot about the law. And did I know anything about battered women? And I said, yes, that I know, because I had been studying that and doing the research. And so he said, well, I'll teach you about the law and you teach me about domestic violence and what that's all about. And I made that bargain with him, and that was almost 40 years ago. And I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah, as they say, the rest is history. Don't mind me, gentlemen, but I'm going to go back to Dr. Walker for a moment. From Jenny Allison, is the need to control more prevalent in men because of testosterone or dependence on a person? There have been many cases lately of relationship abuse and the M word for men and women. What do you say about this?
Well, I think in some cases it may be biological and controlled by the brain, but in most cases it's not. Most of the cases that we're aware of anyhow, it's socially acceptable for a man to hurt a woman, even though it's a crime and could be prosecuted. Men continue to abuse women because they can, because they need power and control. And, there are others who are studying, they call toxic masculinity. These are guys who really cannot exist without feeling like they're under some control and power, where they've got it all. And so I'm so glad there are men involved in this work, because men have to help other men see there are many better ways to get what you want and get your needs met, rather than having to do it by force. And we're still, I'm in it, as I said, 40 years, and we're still struggling to help men, and especially younger men. We do think there's something biological, because younger men tend to be more aggressive, but we're not sure about that. It's across every demographic group that we know.
Yeah, Dr. Walker is a show in and of herself, but back to Brian. Brian, Nico mentioned this. It's a no-body case, at least right now, and I brought up the Barry Morphew, Suzanne Morphew case out of Colorado, because that was a no-body case until about 3 years later, when it was kind of randomly discovered in a super remote part, which is kind of a miracle. But when you're dealing with a no-body case, and he talks specifically about an appellate attorney with skills like you, how does that change the playing field for both the prosecution and the defense?
There is a little strip of paper on my computer that I look at every day, and it says, if you don't tell your story, somebody else will tell it for you. Right now, the defense isn't telling their version of events, and it's being narrated by people who will put you in prison for the rest of your life. Not that they have a responsibility legally, ethically, or morally to do so, but you have to understand, if I'm this guy's defense attorney, and I like they say in the mob, I'm a made guy, but I don't think I've ever heard of this guy, which doesn't mean that he's not a great lawyer. But every crime is a tragedy, but every tragedy is not a crime. And you need to begin crafting a narrative in the court of public opinion to try to dial this down, I don't know, 9 or 10 notches. And you do that by using the media in a way that's both ethical and legal. That's not to say that the defense isn't going to do that at some point, but as it is right now, only somebody's stepping up to the mic, and that's the investigators in the DA's office. And again, as a prosecutor, Nico will tell you, you are held to a much higher standard of what you can and can't say in front of the microphone on the courthouse steps. But make no mistake, circumstantial evidence is every bit as powerful as direct evidence. And really, some people would say that circumstantial evidence is more powerful because unlike witnesses who have more baggage in a Samsonite factory, the physical evidence doesn't lie, guys.
Yeah. I'm definitely, if I get in trouble, I'm calling Nico and having Brian do the appeal for me.
Well, you're assuming I'm going to lose, but that's fine. Brian on the back is great.
Good point. Good point. From Teresa, this is a super chat for Dr. Walker. Will a victim of spousal abuse ever recover from the trauma she has suffered, or will she live with it for life? This is, by the way, coming off the heels. We watched the Susan Smith parole hearing. She is the woman that drowned her 2 kids. And that husband of hers, 30 years later, looks wrecked, destroyed. It's obviously still traumatizing him greatly. But when it comes to these battered women, is it something that it is going to be a painful trauma to deal with till the end of time for them?
Well, many women will deal with some effects of trauma, just like any of us who experience any form of trauma, but especially interpersonal violence of any kind, does have some effects. But with good psychotherapy, most women go on to having a very successful life. And so I would suggest for Teresa to take a look in your community to see who can treat. Not everybody can treat survivors of any kind of physical or sexual abuse. And so find somebody who's trained to do that, and I'm sure you'll go on to having a good life.
There you go. There is hope. There is hope. Look at this. The women are just rolling in here. But if you don't know, the lawyer, I was on his show today. It's going to come out. The women love him. And look at this. Another one. Nico's so handsome. Where are the Brian Weiss ones, man? Where are the Brian Weiss ones? Nico, did you want to hop in there? And I cut you off.
Well, I don't mean to be a joy kill, but doctor, people that know my testimony know that my brother was murdered in my driveway in '96, August 15th of '96.
Sorry to hear
My
that.
parents and my younger brother walked out to it. It was a carjacking went wrong. I loaded his body on the gurney. I helped my pop wash my brother's blood off my driveway, and I picked my mom up off the floor. And so there was a new normal in our lives. For me, I was too, tough or whatever to get help. And so I was stuck in a prism of unforgiveness, doctor, and hatred and anger for about 10 years. It was horrible. For me, I'm a man of faith. I'm a Christian. And so I believe God has used it all. I spoke a lot when I was DA because, we call ourselves survivors when we get into the justice system. Right. I like to think of somebody with the right mindset as an overcomer. And so I've overcome that. I can see how my brother's murder has been used for me spiritually and by God to ultimately serve as a district attorney, to serve as a defense attorney, because 2 years before that, I was arrested for selling drugs. So I have a very interesting journey through the justice system and it's a different podcast. Sorry, but I just couldn't help talk about it.
That's an amazing story. So you were busted for dealing drugs in '94?
Yeah.
94, June of 94. And then 2 years later, in August of '96, my brother was murdered in my driveway. And then I ended up being the district attorney in the same town that both these things happened. I take no credit for that other than just doing life differently because I was stuck in a prism of unforgiveness. And the world, doctor, as you know, tells us, I don't blame you for being angry, unforgiving, hateful, whatever. And then you will replicate what you ingest. And so you can't give what you don't have. If I don't have $20, I can't give you $20. I can only give you $5. And so there's a deeper talk that I do on this, but I just couldn't help it. At least mention it. I didn't mean to derail the conversation.
No, that's incredible to hear that. It gave me the chills and kudos. Did you become a lawyer because of the murder?
No, my pop was a lawyer. I always wanted to work with him. I was obviously not making the right choices. Getting arrested for selling dope doesn't help. And so, but I didn't. But I never thought I'd be a prosecutor because I was arrested for selling drugs. I took a lot of heat locally. I actually witnessed the execution of my brother's murder. And so I have a very personal story about Governor Rick Perry that I'm not trying to badmouth him, but I made a promise to myself because he would not. I'll tell you the story, and I would say it to him in his face, and I wouldn't shake his hand if he offered without a talk. After the talk, I'd probably shake his hand if he wanted to. But after he commuted the sentence, Brian. I don't know if you remember this, on the second person that was convicted on my brother's case, and he would not meet with us. I was driving up to Huntsville. We witnessed the execution of the shooter. The second person, who was the driver and the organizer of the group, he commuted the sentence literally in the 11th hour, did not give us a call, didn't give us a courtesy. And I remember saying to myself, I said, man, not that I ever thought I was going to be DA. I said, if I'm ever in a situation like that, I will never not meet with a parent, with a family, ever. And you can ask people that worked with me. I've been in some of the toughest meetings you can imagine. People that if looks could kill, they would have killed me twice because I made decisions against the death penalty, believe it or not, many times, more times than for it. And so it's just an interesting journey, Joel, maybe for another show. But
yeah, no, I'd love to have you on. I mean, it's about that, but I mean, that's an incredible story. I hope you're either working on a book or something, because it's a story that should be told. And screw Rick Perry.
He's a coward. I mean, I've had some tough meetings. I met with people that even experienced prosecutor for 20 years said, hey, boss, you don't want to meet with these people. I go, do they want to meet with me? Yeah. Some tough meetings. I could do a journal book on just the meetings that I've had with families. But I made a promise to myself and God that I would never abuse that authority. And I met with people, looked them in the eye, told them why I made the decision, gave them my reasoning, even if we disagreed. But I gave them the respect that their family member that they deserve from someone that had wielded that type of authority. So,
wow, look at this. Ned Smith coming up big. She's from the San Antonio area. Weiss is a hunk. So now we're on a level playing field. STS singles is in full effect tonight. Rosemary Romero comes to us from outside Toronto, Canada, for Dr. Lenore Walker. This is a difficult question. You know, every time I talk to a defense attorney or anyone in law enforcement, they always tell me family court is way more dangerous than criminal court. When should women get out of a toxic relationship, Dr. Walker?
Well, I think as soon as you recognize that it's a toxic relationship and there's nothing you can do is going to make it any better, that's the time to try to begin getting out. But you have to understand that even if you get out of these relationships, he may continue to follow you, especially if you have children. As you mentioned, Joel, family court is not a good place to go to resolve conflicts because they can't do that. And so you have to share children with a toxic father. And you'd have less opportunity to protect them. So if you're going to get out, you have to get out carefully, very carefully. And that means you must get help, whether it's family help or whether it's professional help. But you must do it very carefully so that you and your children don't get hurt.
And, Joel, if I could just jump in, I think you and I talked before we came on the air 15 years ago. I was involved in a really high profile case. I think, Nico had just had his quinceanera at the time, but the Susan Wright case, a woman, beautiful, blonde, West Houston housewife, could have been anybody's daughter, anybody's sister. And she was convicted of stabbing her abusive husband 193 times and burying him in the backyard. And I handled the direct appeal and lost. The second appeal to the Court of Criminal Appeals, lost. Came on for the writ of habeas corpus, which for you non-lawyers is basically hashtag Hail Mary. And we were able to litigate the issue of whether her inexperienced but well-meaning criminal defense attorneys were ineffective, dropped the ball by failing to call an expert on battered women syndrome. And is it literally or literally? I literally became, again, that lowercase rabbi on battered women syndrome as a result of this woman that I'm in the box with, and studied her teachings. Like in 1967, I read my Haftorah portion at my bar mitzvah, and it was that serious. And as a result of that, I learned a couple things. Number one, domestic violence knows no area code, no neighborhood, no salary range. The most dangerous time in a battered woman's life is when she tells the abuser, I'm leaving. And I remember at one point I asked my expert, what about protective orders? And she said, Mr. Weiss, bullets go right through them. And as a result of the Susan Wright case and getting Susan a new punishment hearing, Susan was paroled on December 31st of 2020. I actually caught up with her after a very long time of not speaking to her. You know, Facebook is for something more than having your annoying, you know, 5th grade classmate who used to beat you up in the schoolyard contact you. And she has managed to survive. Look, let me say something about closure while we're, and God bless Nico for having had the strength to make it past what happened to him. The 3 most overrated things in life are French cuisine, Notre Dame football, and closure. You know, you will get through it, but you'll never get over it.
Very interesting. I'm loving this panel, by the way. I feel New York energy here, even though it's Texas and Fort Lauderdale panel, but I'm kind of loving it. People they're now putting together. Thanks to, are you guys both married or single? Everyone wants to know. I got to ask.
Let me say this: I'm Houston's most eligible Jewish bachelor, which is like being the coolest Osmond brother or the smartest Kardashian sister. So, you know, I'm on Facebook. I don't ask for much. Weight proportionate to height. Less tattoos than Nico has, and I think we'll be good.
Brian, I'm gonna find you a nice Jewish woman in Houston.
Okay.
If it's the last thing I ever do. This show is totally derailed. Nico, you didn't answer.
Yeah, well, I can't talk over Brian. He had the floor. So, I mean, I've been happily married 18 years to a woman that's way too good for me. We have 4 children that she's blessed us with, and I married up. And anyone, if you meet my wife, you'll agree with me. She's way too good for me.
Well, by the sounds of it, she should be a knockout. By the way, the women here are talking about you. Look at this. It hasn't been like that. Every once in a while, it gets crazy. The hormones, I guess, are in full effect. But tonight is one of those nights. You got Brian, Nico, and the doctor to blame for that. Dr. Walker, someone was asking. We're gonna just meander through this whole. I've got the affidavit too, and I'm always nervous with best guests because Steve Cohen doesn't tell them, but. We usually go about an hour and 15 if that's good for you guys. So a little bit longer. And if Nico, if you want to, by the way, Nico, I heard you were more tatted up, but that's some tats, but that's not bad. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have one on my lower back like Brian does, but I have them on my shoulders and my back and my arms.
You know what?
What?
Tell him it's a sin in the Jewish religion to get a tattoo, just for the record.
That's what they say. Although you go to Israel.
I've seen a lot of
Christians can get tattoos. We're good.
They were in the yard at TDC Chase.
If you go to Israel, like 90% of the people have tattoos. So I think the rabbis are making exceptions. Somehow we're on to Jewish tattooed people. But Dr. Walker, let me try to rein this in a little bit. One of the comments before was, do husbands look at wives as property? How do you
many do. Many of them do look at wives as property. That's an old English kind of laws. At one point, husbands were responsible for anything their wives did. But that's not true any longer. Some men still need control. And so the control sometimes comes by thinking that they're property. But basically, in today's world, women and men, especially in the United States, both work, both earn money, both own their own property. When I first started, women weren't allowed to even have a credit card in our own name if we were married women. I tell that to my students sometimes, and they look at me like, how old are you? Well, the truth is, it's not all that long ago when women were considered property. And for some men, I think it's still going on.
Well, I mean, and we just have to say this, Joel, and I speak just objectively, and I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm not trying not to offend anyone. I'm going to speak the truth, and then they let the chips fall where they may. It comes down to ideology. When I was DA, we had to deal with a group of a community in Bexar County. I know it's in different counties. And this more prevalent in the Islamic community because there's something called Sharia law. And doctor, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, where women are looked at. If you follow Sharia and the Hadith and the Sirah, I mean, I had to really get into this because they were trying to establish, and even in Irving, Texas, they wanted to establish a Sharia court where the Constitution is circumvented and Sharia would govern. And women are looked at as chattel in certain of these type of environments. I'm not saying that every Islamic person believes that way. I'm just telling you what what the ideology of that worldview is. And so we just have to think about that. So
yeah,
I
that's
think
almost
Nico, I
Go
think in every fundamentalist part of the religion, there's some of that, not quite as much, but even in Orthodox Judaism, women have a role that they're supposed to play. Men have a role they're supposed to play, and if you want to leave that very, very fundamentalist Orthodox community, it's not so easy to do so.
Well,
So,
role is different to me than property. I feel like I have a role to serve my wife. I'm a servant leader in my home, and I'm here to honor her and to respect her and to just to love on her, and I elevate her. She runs our home.
Right.
I lead the family. She runs the home, and that's a complementary relationship in my worldview. But a role is different than chattel, than property. I think I repudiate that. I don't care what worldview supports that. Women are women. I have 2 daughters and 2 sons, so and so I raise our children, our daughters, to be strong. They all fight. They do self-defense. They think. I want them to critically think. I grow them strong in their faith, and then I want them to serve their families like my wife has given an example to our family. So I'm just, again, I know people get uncomfortable when you talk about things like that, but when I was in office, I had to deal with it. We prosecuted a couple in that community that had arranged the marriage of their daughter. She didn't want to be sold or arranged the marriage, so she left. Scalding water was thrown on her, burned, and then they tried to put on an act. They should have applied for a movie role because, why are you leaving? We ended up prosecuting them because they committed an aggravated assault against their own daughter, and we prosecuted both the mom, the husband, and the wife. So again, I'm not saying everybody. I look at ideology when we're making that assessment only because that came up. Not everybody believes that. I don't see that as much. I don't. Anybody that believes in any masculinity that involves controlling somebody other than serving, leading, that's not masculinity to me. That's some type of bastardization of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, very, very eloquently stated. Carmela Waldman, that would be my mom. She is the sometimes co-host of this show. She has got a few years on Dr. Walker, and she is a child Holocaust survivor. And Brian, I was going to tell you, I just wrote a book about her, which everyone's going to make fun of me for because I'm not supposed to promote it anymore. But you, of all people, will enjoy this book. Same title as the podcast, Surviving the Survivor. Anywhere books are sold, check it out. I think both of you will enjoy it too for different reasons, Dr. Walker and Nico. So please check it out. Let me know what you think.
I'm writing murder mysteries now, Joel.
Oh yeah. Oh really?
I am. I'm publishing them under my name on Amazon because I really want to tell the stories of some of the work that I've been doing over the years, and it's hard to do that as a psychologist. We have a lot of ethics that we have to follow, and I believe in them. So instead, I just make them up, and I'm having the best time.
Well, let me tell you something. My mom lives about 15 miles from you in Miami Beach, so I think I'm going to set you two up on a date. I think you'll have a lot to talk about. Carm is yelling at me that I make her work too hard. She's not doing this. She's not doing that. But if you're writing books, I'll have her work with you. I love that.
I love that.
Yeah, here we go. Mossberg mom, best mom in the chat.
Yeah, you didn't ask if I was married. I am. I am married for 25 years with a great husband.
Wow, what's his name?
Who doesn't try to control me.
What's his first name?
David.
We'll have to get David on the show. I'll have to ask him some questions. But all right, so back to occasionally we'll be talking about Suzanne Simpson tonight. This is the missing mom of 4. So, Brian, to you, according to this affidavit now, this guy is making contradictory statements. He says that she lost her phone while she was at HEB, which I'd never heard of until the story. The defendant stated that he peeked into a separate room and observes his wife asleep, which contradicts his statement about not seeing his wife when he initially spoke to patrol officers Maldonado and A. Davila on the night of 10. The point is, the guy appears to be lying through his teeth. You're his defense attorney. What are you? How are you angling your defense at this point?
Well, anybody who's ever binge watched Law and Order recognizes that what Jack McCoy loves to tell us is that the most compelling evidence that the prosecution can produce is what he calls consciousness of guilt. The guilty flee where none pursueth. and that's you lied, you destroyed evidence, you created a false alibi, all of which we may have in this case. But to answer your question, Joel, I am going to try to put the jury in my client's shoes. Look, this guy's not a career criminal. This guy's a businessman. Anybody who's ever been confronted with the specter of law enforcement, anybody who's ever, I've sat across, and I know Nico has too, from some Texas Rangers. I mean, these guys are the real deal. These guys are the, in the words of John Hamm in The Town, and I'll clean it up, they're the not screwing around crew. And so if you can put your client in a position of having to contend with these law enforcement professionals, yeah, it's understandable that you can be as nervous as a hooker in a church when you sit down with these guys, and there's an explanation for that. And again, it's to go to yet another pop culture reference like Steve Cohn would. Yeah. When Otter is asked whether or not that scam's going to work in Animal House, what does he say? Well, it's got to work better than the truth, right?
By the way, I can tell Steve Cohn and Brian Weiss are going to be besties, man. They've got
it's my guy.
Very similar sense of humor for sure.
You got to come up with a theme, Joel. You got to come up with a theme. Misspeaking doesn't mean murder. Something like that sticks in their head, and you weave that theme throughout the whole defense. Now, I don't know if the evidence will support that, but we represented a client just about 3 weeks ago in federal court where it was a contract to hire to murder his ex father-in-law, and the problem was it was on video, and it was to a confidential informant. We ended up getting an acquittal, which is tough to do in federal court, and our theme was this was a conversation, not a contract. And then we put context to the conversation, taken out of context, there's another C, and we had the evidence to support that, but we had to kind of piecemeal it together. This may be one of those, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, where you chip away at it. You're not going to have, the evidence that's going to come out like a smoking gun to say, hey, this is it, he's innocent, we were wrong. It may be one of those chip away cases where you're going to get, it's really a reasonable doubt case. And so sometimes the approach in a case like this is really all about reasonable doubt. And you explain that to a jury, you're not going to convince them. Not sure is not guilty. If you're thinking, we don't presume people guilty. And then you give them every other reason, kind of Brian's put him in the place of the defendant without saying it. And then you give all these other reasons, right, Brian? And without doing all these other reasons where they can just hang on saying like, I'm not sure. I hesitated. And then that's really your only hope if you have a case where the evidence is overwhelming. I'm not there yet. So
that's a great point, because when I talk to lawyers at CLEs and on how to deal with the media, I basically tell them, with all due respect, and by the way, your listeners need to know, you can tell anybody anything in life, including a judge, as long as you preface it by saying, with all due respect.
With all due respect.
So with all due respect, I tell lawyers, and I see it and I hear it
That's right.
every day. Any lawyer that walks out on the courthouse steps or goes on a podcast and says, I'm going to demonstrate my client's innocence, needs to be working at Chick-fil-A. Yeah. Okay? It's not your burden, you putz.
That's right.
Your burden is to demonstrate that there's reasonable doubt that the state's case has more holes than the Iraqi Navy. That's your mandate. And in that situation, like you said, you create a theme, you create a narrative. Every crime's a tragedy. Every tragedy is not a crime. This guy's not a professional criminal. Of course he misspoke. Whatever it is, and you continue to do that. And again, I like the elephant analogy, but again, as a former sports writer, spoiler alert, it's going to be a sports analogy. It's, Joe Torre said when they were down in game 3 in the World Series to Atlanta, they were down like 7 runs. He's like, look, you can't hit a 7-run homer. What you do is exactly what Nico said. You get it back 1 run at a time, and ultimately the playing field becomes level. And before you know it, again, even if you don't get that 2-word verdict, in this case, if you get a hung jury, they ought to build a statue of you on the courthouse steps.
Yeah. Very interesting. For some reason, whenever a defense attorney says something, I start to believe them. I don't know why, but it's the power of persuasion, especially when Brian Weiss is talking. Brian, this is for you here. Why do prosecutors love to say anyone who watches Law and Order, but cops love to say this isn't Law and Order? It doesn't work that way. Could you please explain this? They're asking. And
you know what? It's not so much Law and Order. I've talked to prosecutors. I've read appellate records. And one of the things that we see during jury selection with PowerPoint, which I never thought would ultimately happen in my lifetime, but it did, is what prosecutors call the CSI effect. It's like they expect jurors to solve the crime in 53 minutes with a commercial break. And we know that's not how it is. So it's not really Law and Order, but from where I sit, Law and Order is the most realistic depiction of the criminal justice system that I've seen. You got to understand, when I was a kid, growing up on TV, there were 3 stations, ABC, CBS, and NBC. They went off the air at midnight, all right? They played the Star Spangled Banner, and they went to static, all right? The show that I grew up on, one of the shows that made me want to go to law school was Dragnet. Google it, you guys, you freaking millennials, all right? You'll love it. There's a guy named Jack Webb, who, again, could not have lived a burp at a soda eating contest, okay? And the cops always won. I mean, they were the Harlem Globetrotters against the Washington Generals. Cops didn't beat confessions out of people. Evidence wasn't suppressed. And then here came Law and Order. And ultimately, yeah, it may not be like that in real life, but it's a lot closer to the way things are than anything else that I've ever seen.
I'm gonna have to. This is the first time I'm gonna disagree with Brian. The most realistic show for me is not Law and Order. It's My Cousin Vinny. I don't know why you would say Law and Order. You offend me, Brian.
There you go. There you go.
By the way, this is true. Carm, my mom, I like saying no offense before you insult somebody. She does it to me more than she'll say, no offense, but you're a complete idiot. Stuff like that.
Yeah, with all due respect.
And it's always no offense. And then she's immediately offending you in some way or another. But Dr. Walker, I don't know how the show ended up being the show tonight, but I like it. I like the vibe. So Dr. Walker, Suzanne Simpson, after she's seen by neighbors kind of getting hit by her husband on the evening of October 6th, she calls a family friend, a guy named Graham Matthews, and says, hey, I'm coming over. Police verified this through surveillance video. And then at 9:16 that night, she calls her mother, Barbara Clark, to say that she had that her husband had just assaulted her, causing pain to her arm, back, and neck. The call lasted about 8 minutes. Not there too long thereafter. It appears the defendant suspends her phone service altogether. You were asking earlier in the show about whether there was a history of DV here. We obviously don't know the whole history, but just in regards to what she told her private banker and some of the things we're hearing, it sure seems like this guy was incredibly controlling. What is coercive control? And what I don't understand is there's so many relationships gone bad. How do you know when they're going to go really bad? Like why are certain husbands able to maintain, even when they're frustrated, some sort of level of cool or walk away, where others just snap and kill these women?
Well, I think that the 2 questions there. The first one that you just believe the woman. She knows when it's going bad and it can't be fixed. We don't like to always believe women when they say it, but they know it in their heart. Oftentimes they can't do anything about it, but and as I said before, you've got to do it slowly. Whatever you're going to do has to be done very carefully, slowly, with thought, so that you don't get hurt. Because that's what happens when women try to fight back, is that these guys who are abusive are going to fight hard, and they'll hurt them even worse. So they have to be careful about that.
Yeah, Doctor. I'm sorry. I was going to ask you another question real quick. Sure. Sorry to cut myself off with another question, but I live in the land of material goods, which is Miami, the home of Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and a lot of implants and transplants, implants and transplants. But what kind of factor does financial stress have in men snapping? I mean, I never really thought about this stuff, about not snapping, but about money and finances, till I had a family. And obviously there's tremendous pressure still in 2024 on men. Right. So have you seen any correlation between financial stress and men doing this, also knowing that Brad Simpson was financially in trouble?
Financial stress often plays a role. The more stress you're under, the more difficult it is to control your emotions. And for men, they tend to learn how to change all their feelings into anger. So you're a little bit upset, you become angry. You are sad about something, you turn it into anger. And the more angry you are, the more you strike out and less control you have over your behavior. And so it's a vicious cycle. So the financial stress plays a role in many of the cases that I work on.
From Jenny here, do we have a coercive control law in America? Nico, I don't think we do. We do in Ireland. Is there any kind of law revolving around
in California? They have just recently passed a coercive control law. It's used mostly, coercive control is used mostly in family law cases. These are in cases where women are trying to get divorced and are trying to protect the child rather than be in forced joint custody. Because that kind of forced shared parental responsibility means she still has to work with him, and he's not going to work with her. And so it does not protect her or the kids.
Yeah, well, kidnapping is coercive control, right? I mean, if you think of it, right, Brian?
Well,
I mean,
that's the ultimate, right?
I mean, it's not called coercive control. There's different coercive statutes that have that element weaved into it when you're looking at the elements that have to be proven.
And it's interesting that Joel, that you brought up financial stress, or going south, as it were, because juries, and I know that again, hopefully, Nico will have my back on this. The state doesn't have to prove motive. All right, you can look at the penal code and the code of criminal procedure until I win a daytime Emmy for this segment. Okay, it's not going to happen, but in any case, particularly a murder, particularly a case like this is, again, ripped from today's headlines, jurors want to know why. And in that situation, whether it's spousal abuse, whether it's financial difficulty, whether it's just having an affair or anything like that, juries want to know why. And then again, as an old-time homicide detective told me one time, I said, why do people do crazy stuff like this? He said, son, everybody's got their reasons.
Yeah, and prosecutors voir dire on this. Up north, you call it voir dire. Down here in Texas, we call it voir dire. I mean, it's the jury selection process. I mean, a prosecutor will voir dire on that and say, look, we don't have to prove them. Here are the elements. We don't have to prove a motive. I mean, I know you'll want that. How many want to give us an extra element? Because then you'll strike them for cause. So there's a lot of strategy when you're picking a jury, whether you're a prosecutor or a defense lawyer. And so so it's really jury deselection. I'm sure you've talked about this on the show before. It's not jury selection. It's deselection.
100%.
So that's something that a prosecutor would voir dire on, or should voir dire on.
Yeah, interesting. Nico, I was reading something about Texas law. I think it has to be at least 7 years before someone is declared dead. Is this true? I mean, what happens with Suzanne Simpson here, and how does that alter the case if she is in fact declared?
I'm not aware of a statute. Brian can correct me if I'm wrong. The Stovall case waited 6 years. The longer that person is missing, I think the better circumstantial evidence the government has to prove that they would not using their Social Security, they weren't using their bank accounts, they didn't use their phone, they didn't sign up here, they would have never left their child alone or missed this person or that person. And then you bring people to testify to that fact. So you circumstantially prove, which time helps, that somebody is dead. And then you try to connect that circumstantial death to the person you're accusing of. And that's when you can ping a phone, you can triangulate a phone off the towers. You can DNA, of course, admissions, lies. I mean, there's other ways you can prove that too. So I don't know everything they have. And to Brian's point earlier, they don't have to lift up their skirt or show their hand. So they're gonna do just enough to get probable cause to get past this examining trial if they don't indict them before December 9th. I would assume they would indict them before December 9th. You don't want a defense attorney having have an early crack at some of your witnesses, because now you have a transcript that could go back and bite you in the ass later on if you have to try this before a petit jury.
Yeah, I don't know.
The larger question, speaking of hearings, and again, if I'm wrong, I'll be the first to admit it. I haven't seen any indication yet that there's been a hearing that's going to determine whether or not this defendant's bond is going to be reduced. Because I've been fortunate to litigate this issue in courts of appeals. Look, bond is not supposed to be an instrument of oppression. All right. I didn't make that up, guys. It actually says that in the Code of Criminal Procedure. In a situation like this, if you file a motion to reduce bond and you lose, that's it. You're done. You're 86th. If you file, again, here's that term, writ of habeas corpus, to reduce the bond, you can then appeal that. And again, I'm thinking, well, this guy may be a flight risk. At some point, if you have that habeas corpus writ hearing on bond, you may be also able to discover more of the state's case than you're likely to get at an examining trial or by just having a bunch of documents turned over to you. Look, I think part of that theme that we talked about, that Nico said you've got to stress and hit until your head throbs, is that this defendant may not be father of the year or husband of the year. But I remember Alan Dershowitz's famous opening line in the Rhode Island Supreme Court in the Klaus von Bülow appeal, and Ron Silver in the movie Reversal of Fortune actually played Alan better than Alan plays Alan. And his opening line was, "You may not like Klaus von Bülow, but he is innocent." Again, at some point, I want to see something happening in the court of public opinion that gets this case in a situation where the playing field is level.
Brian's right. We're a firm that deal with high profile cases, and part of our representation is the narrative. You have to think about wherever, especially the bigger, the broader the scope of the coverage. You have to think about your juries wherever you're going to end up, and you have to start planting seeds, changing the narrative. Something is better than nothing. We are not those lawyers in this firm, the no comment lawyers. You always give a comment. Some are tempered. When you have more evidence and you can be a little bolder, then you might be a little more brash professionally brash on your comments. But we don't overpromise, but we don't underpromise either. We got to say something, because if your point is that the government in so many terms is lying, not lying intentionally to harm, but is falsely accusing your client, a false accusation that goes unchecked becomes the truth. And so you've got to check these false accusations if that's your opinion that it's a false accusation. So I agree with Brian completely that there's a PR aspect to representing high profile clients, and you have to make comments early and often.
We've got a super chat here from Teresa, Luck of the Irish. Beautiful hair, by the way, if that is you and your hair. Police cannot help if one is getting verbal threats from the spouse. They say, come back if he hurts you. Dr. Walker, what's the deal with our laws here? You do see that, when you're watching cops or, on patrol live, the police always are saying, if it's just verbal, just have them calm down. Does that need to change?
I don't know whether it needs to change or not. It's a good question, because people can lose their tempers and can say things that they don't mean. So you have to be very careful about the consequences of changing something like that. On the other hand, when there are threats, then we need to take it more seriously. And in those cases, maybe we do need some better laws that will protect women better and protect children better, especially if you're being called to that house more than one time.
And Dr. Walker, while I have you, I'm thinking of the 4 kids, Suzanne Simpson's 4 kids. 2 are grown-ups now.
Right.
1 is 5. What is the psychological impact on the children in these relationships where the husband is abusive?
Well, the children are always the ones who get hurt without always getting any kind of help to deal with what's going on for them, especially in cases, not in this case because he is incarcerated, but what if he was let out and then the court allowed him to have contact with the children, and especially the young ones? Are they going to be frightened? Do they know whether he really harmed the mother or not? They probably are aware if there was prior domestic violence, prior control kinds of things. They know what's going on. I've never met a child, even in cases where women tell me, oh no, I protected them, where they didn't hear something or see something that made them scared. And so these are kids that I would hope they get some treatment right away. So they have somebody outside of family who also they can talk to.
Interesting. Couples here says children feel the energy from incidents. I'm sure that is correct. Just a couple of quick things and we'll get final thoughts. I'm going to have Brian play defense attorney and Nico play prosecutor here. Here we go. This guy, according to the affidavit, stops at a Whataburger because all alleged killers have got to get a snack before or after. And it says your affiant observed the following items in the defendant's truck bed: 3 white trash bags, a large gray heavy-duty trash can, an ice chest, a large bulky item wrapped and secured in a blue tarp with a silver in color metal firewood rack placed on top of the blue tarp in a manner to conceal and weigh the tarp down. Upon further observation of the blue tarp, your affiant believes that there's an unknown object concealed within the blue tarp due to its shape and size, and it's being secured by a strap/rope. Brian, you got a tough job because the minute I'm hearing blue tarp, Home Depot, and cement, I'm convicting this guy if I'm on the jury. Tell me why I shouldn't.
Well, and then Rabbi, you left out the best part. I think there's like Lysol or Clorox.
Yeah.
Something like
Clorox, that. 1 bottle of 30-ounce Clorox disinfectant.
And really, if I have to play this part, another pop culture reference, I watched Goodfellas again for like the 958th time. And you remember that scene where they got Billy Bats in the trunk and they stabbed the hell out of him. And Joe Pesci goes home to his mom and he says, "What happened?" He said, "We hit a deer, and it was the hoof." So maybe this guy hit a deer and Bernie. I mean, I don't know. But maybe he did some spring cleaning. I think the short answer is I don't have to tell you. I do want to create reasonable doubt, so I have to come forward with the narrative because silence is ultimately deadly. And again, if you don't tell your story, somebody else will tell it for you. But it doesn't have to be ironclad. It just needs to move, as Nico said, one juror. That's the beauty of being a criminal defense attorney, is that you only need one. The guy with the white hat needs all 12.
Nico, once again, Brian has given me a modicum of doubt, which is all I need. But listen, this is definitely on the DA's side. We've got on top of the tarp and these other things, guy stops at Home Depot, gets quick reet cement, whatever that is. As we just mentioned, this Clorox disinfectant. He gets a Home Depot bucket. He asked some guy at Home Depot, "Where's the nearest dump site?" To me, this is easy work for a prosecutor. I love that ring, by the way. I should have that as my opening.
That's two.
I love it. I love it.
She's busy.
Yeah.
She's popular.
Yeah, exactly. So, Nico, how are you playing your cards with this tarp, the concrete? It doesn't smell too good.
Yeah, a prosecutor will always talk about the burden of proof. We don't have to prove the case beyond all possible doubt. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. What's reasonable? We give a lot of examples of circumstantial evidence. I would say if somebody's trying to hide a murder without committing to our facts, you let the jury speak out. What would you do to hide a murder, cover up a murder, get rid of a body? You bring up Jimmy Hoffa. Nobody ever found Jimmy Hoffa's body, but no one thinks he's alive unless he's hanging out with somebody else, maybe Prince or somebody Michael Jackson. They say he's not dead. But all I'm saying is you do those type of things, and then you prepare them in your voir dire. That theme comes through your opening statement, and you already know who's on. If you do the right voir dire with your defense or the government, you know the mindset that's on your jury, and you're playing to certain jurors. Like Brian said, as a defense attorney, you want a juror that is, even if that one juror that holds out and is not going to be persuaded by the rest of the 11. But as a prosecutor, I mean, I would commit them early on to a circumstantial case, what we have to prove and don't have to prove, that we accept our burden. We're proud to have our burden. And I'm not embarrassed of it or afraid of it. And then I would just embrace the fact that we don't have a body and talk about that. And I would have given examples in voir dire. So, I mean, look, if it walks like a duck, sounds like a duck, quacks like it's a duck, it's that type of deal. I mean, so this sounds like a duck, but still, I haven't seen all the evidence yet.
Yeah. What an amazing trio. First time that I can remember, we had 3 brand new best guests in one shot, and all 3 are amazing. I like this panel. I might have to, if they're willing to come back, I will maybe keep it intact. And by the way, we do other stories. Brian, is Diddy, as they say in Yiddish, is he screwed? Sean Diddy Combs.
Well, all right. Somebody just said, gee, Brian really loves those movies. Yeah, so let me give you my final thing from A Few Good Men. Diddy doesn't need a lawyer. He needs a priest.
There's, by the way, there's another. We're doing this tomorrow night. We're going to get Brian.
He's going to get stuffed in the tuchus. So.
Yeah. We're going to get Brian and Nico back on these other stories. And, of course, Dr. Lenore Walker. But Brian Weiss, he's been recognized by his peers. And you heard Nico say one of the top criminal appellate and post-conviction writ lawyers in Texas. He's done it all. He was also a journalist for a while, went to University of Houston, Phi Slamma Jamma. Your final thoughts. What's next for this case, Brian?
Well, like I said, we have a December the 9th setting. Whether or not that ever sees the inside of a courtroom is one of life's unanswered questions. Again, by the time we wake up tomorrow, this case could have been indicted. There may or may not be a contested hearing on bond. I think the one thing that's certain, other than death and taxes, is going to be a motion to change venue. Given the firestorm of publicity that this case has engendered, I think there's going to be a concerted effort on the defense to take this show on the road, guys.
Oh, there you go. Change of venue. Helen Fong, Joel, your guests are the best. It's not just the best guest in true crime. It's not just a tagline. It is our reality. We are changing the media landscape here, and we're bringing you a new channel shortly, a second channel with a lot of best guests who are going to have their own shows. Maybe Nico and Brian and Dr. Walker want in. I'll have to talk to. I could see Nico and Brian doing a show together.
Oh, yeah, let's do it, Brian.
Don't mess with Texas. The Don't Mess with Texas show. Nico, his real first name Nicholas, obviously very interesting, charismatic guy, former Bexar County District Attorney. Now he's just a criminal defense attorney, doing the hard work there, and obviously a very bright mind. I think I started with this. So I guess my final question is, will Brad Simpson be indicted, as Brian just suggested, before this examining hearing? What is next, in your opinion, in this case?
I try not to anticipate what this DA's office will do. So, because I can't believe it's gone this far, but he should be indicted before this. I would not risk doing an examining trial if I was prosecuting this case, knowing that you got some issues, at least down the road, with some of your evidentiary problems you have. But will it be indicted? He has some time. I mean, you still have 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks before you do it. You can indict in a second, in minutes, in a day. So like Brian said, this could be indicted this week, and next week it'd be indicted on December 8th. So I would, if I had to bet, I would hope, if I was given counsel, that this should be indicted before the examining trial. But I mean, it's a full evidentiary hearing. I mean, they're going to have to authenticate videos if they're going to bring you videos in. If they bring the detective in, if they're going to bring the daughter in to talk about what mommy said or didn't say, the friend, the neighbor, and then you're subjected into cross-examination and then having a transcript. And if they fumble the ball during that, then you might hurt I mean, strategically, unless Brian has a different opinion, I could not see why the government would not indict this case before the examining trial. But again, I'm not in the office right now, so I can't speak.
Yeah. By the way, do you have a line into the office? Can you call the DA and get as much info as you want, or do they?
I used to be able to say most of the people in the office used to work for me, but many of them have left because of the office. So I don't know. There's a whole new crew in there. There's still some left over, and there's some good prosecutors there, but it's a different culture there for now, for sure.
I get the feeling this DA is not well liked, but we'll see. What do I know? I'm out in Miami. But last but certainly not least, I was getting yelled at early on. How come you're not asking her more questions? What can I tell you? I had Brian Weiss and Nico LaHood on. These guys are excellent. So is Dr. Lenore Walker. She literally wrote the book Battered Woman's Syndrome. Dr. Walker, we've got a lot of women in our chat. We're like 85% women, 15% men, as are a lot of true crime watchers. What if someone is going through a difficult time in a relationship, or feel like they're either being emotionally abused or know that they're being physically abused? What is your advice to these people?
Seek help. My advice is to seek help, whether it be a mental health worker who's trained in working with domestic violence, whether it be a battered woman shelter in your community, whether it be a friend, a close friend. Don't keep it to yourself. Many women are afraid to talk about what's happening, but the more you talk about it, the more you begin to realize you can find some things to do that will protect yourself. So don't keep it inside.
There you go. You just heard it from Dr. Walker. Do not internalize it. Let someone know, a friend, law enforcement, whoever you trust. Please let them know. Ida Shaw, JD, Joel, recreate the show. I can't do it identical to this one, but with the same guest. So I got to ask, Brian, will you come back?
In a heartbeat, like that.
This is more fun than court TV, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm going to get Neapolitan to call you, all right, on your cell phone, number one. Look, this has been an incredible time. Thank you, Steve Cohen, for booking me. Thank you, Marissa Mendoza, for putting me on the air in San Antonio so that I could ultimately make this appearance tonight. And most of all, I'd like to thank the Academy, because merely being nominated is an honor, guys.
By the way, our goal at SDS is very humble. We want to be the Super Bowl halftime show at an upcoming Super Bowl. We think it's quirky enough, and it might just happen. Dr. Walker, will you come back on the show?
I certainly will, and I promise I'll silence my phone.
Oh, it's awesome. I'm definitely setting you up on a date with my mother.
I love it. I love it.
Look at Madeline Bullitt. Great panel, Joel. Great points of view. Thanks again for all you do. Thank you. Nico, will you come back on?
I'd be honored to come back, brother. Let me know.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys so much. Another amazing panel of best guests. Love you, America. Love you, Texas. Don't mess with Texas. Love you, Florida. And let's get justice for Suzanne Simpson. We're doing Diddy tomorrow night. A lot of developments. Do you know this Tony Busby guy, by the way, Brian?
I sure do. Again, he's Nico LaHood without the spray tan. And
Is it true that he has a tank on his front lawn?
He had a tank. And you know what? Once again, look, Tony Busby's a warrior. Number one, former Marine. Tony's an acquired taste, like sushi or some kinds of, primitive culture sex. But at the end of the day, is there a better trial lawyer in the great state of Texas? You know what? He may not be in a class by himself, but it don't take long to call the roll, guys.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. That's got to be a movie reference, I think. I don't know. But anyway, I was thinking, Brian, I got to get maybe you, Nico, and Tony Busby, and we'll talk Diddy if you guys are down.
Oh, no, there's not going to be enough oxygen in the room for the three. You think Nico and we're bad and we suck the oxygen out? Tony Busby will shut this down in less time than Kim Kardashian's first marriage. Bada boom. That's it.
Bada bing.
So Brian, you got to get him on my show, which we'll do.
I'll give you his cell off the air, but you didn't get it from me.
I won't. I'll
Just ratted yourself out, Brian.
By the way, Phil Waters says hello and sends his regards.
That's my guy. Guy. Love Phil.
Yeah, Phil's the best. Anyway, love you all. Justice for Suzanne Simpson. Guests, stick around 1 second. See you tomorrow, 7 o'clock on Diddy.